All right. Happy Friday, everyone. When I'm finished here, you will hear from our friend Maximo Torero, the Food and Agriculture Organization's chief economist, and he will brief you on FAO's Food Price Index for April 2023. A few hours ago, the Secretary General arrived in Bujumbura, Burundi, to take part in the 11th high-level meeting of the Regional Oversight Mechanism of the Peace, Security, and Cooperation Framework for the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the region. This is his first visit to the country as Secretary General. As we speak, the Secretary General is meeting President Évariste Ndayishimiye. We expect him to speak to the press shortly, and will share with you his remarks as soon as he's delivered them. Tomorrow, he will speak at the opening of the meeting of the Regional Oversight Mechanism, along with leaders from the Great Lakes region, who will take stock of progress and challenges in the implementation of the agreement signed in Addis Ababa 10 years ago. They will discuss the implementation of the Luanda and Nairobi agreements. On Saturday, after leaving Burundi, the Secretary General will head to Spain, where he will receive the Carlos V European Award, granted by the European and Ibero-American Academy of Yuste Foundation. On Monday, the 9th of May, the Secretary General will meet in Madrid with the President of the Government of Spain, Pedro Sánchez Pérez Castejón. On Tuesday, he will be presented with the Carlos V European Award at a ceremony at the Royal Monastery of Yuste, presided over by the King of Spain, Felipe VI. During the ceremony, the Secretary General will deliver remarks in Spanish, and you will be able to watch the ceremony on UN Web TV. The Secretary General will arrive back in New York on Tuesday evening. In a statement issued today from Kabul, the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan reiterates its commitment to stay and deliver on behalf of the men, women, and children of Afghanistan, and appeals to our donors to keep funding the assistance people need. To achieve this efficiently and effectively, the UN needs all its personnel, women and men, to work in communities and UN offices unimpeded. I know you've asked repeatedly about our staff situation given the restrictions on women in Afghanistan. For now, we can only say that UN entities on the ground in Afghanistan continue to discuss appropriate working modalities. Meanwhile, humanitarian operations continue to be undertaken. Our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that the situation in Sudan is increasingly dire. The UN Children's Fund says it has received reports that as of the 25th of April, 190 children have been killed in the fighting. UNICEF is unable to confirm casualty estimates due to the intensity of the violence. Meanwhile, the World Food Programme projects that the number of acutely food insecure people in Sudan will increase by between 2 and 2.5 million people. That raises the number to a total of 19 million people in the next 3 to 6 months if the current conflict continues. The states expected to see the highest food insecurity in the coming months are West Darfur, West Kordofan, Blue Nile, Red Sea, and North Darfur. For its part, the UN Refugee Agency and partners have announced that $445 million will be needed to support an estimated outflow of 860,000 refugees and returnees from Sudan in 5 countries affected by the emergency. UNHCR has launched a data portal that will update new numbers daily of refugees and returnee arrivals in neighboring countries. The agency urges states to keep their borders open to those fleeing the violence and urges all countries to allow civilians fleeing Sudan non-discriminatory access to their territories, and to suspend forced returns to Sudan, including of people who have previously had their asylum claims rejected. Today, the Joint Coordination Center has not reached agreement to authorize new vessels to participate in the Black Sea Initiative. The JCC continues its daily inspection work on the previously authorized vessels. As you will recall, the Secretary General has communicated to all parties his proposal on the way forward aimed at the improvement, extension, and expansion of the initiative, taking into account positions expressed by the parties. We urge all parties to continue their discussions, overcome operational challenges, and work towards the full implementation and continuation of the initiative. And in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the UN Refugee Agency is concerned about the devastating consequences of recurring attacks by armed groups on displaced people. They say that with 6.2 million internally displaced people and more than 1.3 million Congolese who have sought refuge in other African countries, the situation in the DRC is one of the continent's most complex and long-standing humanitarian crises. As an example, on the outskirts of Goma and in the adjacent territory of Nyiragongo, UNHCR says that as many as 564,000 people remain displaced. a lack of infrastructure and sanitation has led to significant health threats, such as cholera and measles. The agency is calling for humanitarian efforts to be urgently supported. Turning to Nigeria, our humanitarian colleagues are warning about widespread hunger and child malnutrition in the northeast of the country, as the lean season is set to begin next month. They said some 4.3 million people in the conflict-affected states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe are projected to face severe hunger between June and August, with almost 600,000 people facing emergency levels of food shortage. An estimated 2 million children under 5 in the 3 states are facing wasting, the most immediate and life-threatening form of malnutrition. The World Food Program is scaling up operations to provide emergency food and nutrition assistance to 2.1 million people, while the UN Children's Fund is providing therapeutic treatment to severely wasted children. The Food and Agriculture Organization is also working to reach 2 million people with seed packages to ensure production of cereals for the next harvest. The message from our humanitarian partners in Nigeria is urgent. We must scale up interventions, including food and livelihood assistance. Humanitarian partners in the Northeast need $1.3 billion this year, but have so far received just over 11% of that amount. Today, the World Health Organization Director General, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, has determined that COVID-19 is now an established and ongoing health issue, which no longer constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. During the 15th meeting of the International Health Regulations Emergency Committee regarding the pandemic, members highlighted the decreasing trend in COVID-19 deaths, the decline in COVID-19 related hospitalizations and intensive care unit admissions, and the high levels of population immunity to SARS coronavirus 2. While acknowledging the remaining uncertainties posed by the potential evolution of SARS coronavirus 2, they advised that it is time to transition to long-term management of the COVID-19 pandemic. The WHO added that this does not mean that COVID-19 is over as a global health threat, and recommends that all states parties integrate COVID-19 vaccination into life course vaccination programs and continue to support research to improve vaccines that reduce transmission, among other recommendations. Today is Vesak Day, the day of the full moon in the month of May, and it is the most sacred day to millions of Buddhists around the world. It's also World Portuguese Language Day, and the Portuguese language is one of the most widespread languages in the world, and today remains a major language of international communications. And we would like to say thank you to our friends in Eritrea for paying their regular budget dues in full. This brings the number of fully paid up member states to 104. And that's it for me. Are there any questions before we go to our guest? Yes, Deji.
Something wrong with the mic. Okay. First, Black Sea Green Initiative, is there any update on the extension of that deal? The time of 18th of May is fast approaching.
Well, the 18th of May is a review date set by one of the parties. It's not a date agreed by all. But what I can say is right now, today, UN representatives will be participating in a technical meeting convened by the government of Turkey on the initiative in preparation for the senior level meeting taking place next week in Istanbul. So we're looking forward to constructive and frank discussions with all sides with the aim to overcome challenges and work towards the continuation and full implementation of the initiative.
Do you know who will be participating in that high-level meeting next week?
At this stage, the details are to be determined.
For the UN, would Ms. Rebecca Greenspan and Mr. Martin Griffith in that meeting?
In the meeting that's happening next week?
Next week.
The details are to be determined. Right now, Rebecca Greenspan is in Moscow, as I believe we confirmed a couple of days ago.
Okay. My next question, just to follow up on your statement about the WHO's announcement that COVID-19 is no longer a public health emergency of international concern. Does the Secretary General has anything to say on this decision?
Well, I think any sign of progress in the fight against COVID-19 is a welcome thing. And certainly the Secretary General welcomes the news in that regard. But of course, as is clear from what the World Health Organization is saying today, we need to remain vigilant. This is still a disease that kills people around the world. And there's still a need to make sure that all countries are adequately prepared, including by having vaccines to deal with this disease.
One last question. For the past few weeks, I think there's a controversy over a TV series called on Cleopatra, especially causing furies of some Egyptian people because of the choice of the actress of the main character. Some people call this blackwashing because we know the sensitivity of this issue. Just want to know how would the United Nations think of political correctness or history accuracy? You know?
Well, this is not really a discussion for the United Nations, and I can safely say that this is the first and probably only time that I've been asked about Cleopatra, whose existence long precedes that of the United Nations. Yes, Yvonne.
Thanks, Farhan, and apologies if I missed this at the beginning. Did you say that there's a written report detailing the outcome of the Afghanistan review?
I believe there's a press release that the country team has issued in Kabul. I read a little bit of it at the start of this.
But is there a longer report?
No. At this stage, what there's been is discussions amongst all of the various UN entities working in Afghanistan. I don't have any actual change in our posture on the ground to report to you, although I did talk with our colleagues there, and it's clear that that our status and our policy regarding staff in Afghanistan will be under constant review. It has not changed.
Okay, so all staff, male and female, are still working at home?
Aside from critical functions, that's the case for the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. I believe that different agencies have different mandates about the provision of aid, and so they have had different ways of handling the situation. As I characterized it, the UN entities on the ground in Afghanistan continue to discuss appropriate working modalities. Meanwhile, humanitarian operations continue to be undertaken. Yes, Edie.
I have another question on a completely different matter. Can we come back to that?
Oh, sure. Edie first, because I think she's got a follow-up, and then we'll come to you. Yes.
A couple of follow-ups on this meeting in Istanbul. You're not giving out any names, but why would you have a meeting if there weren't representatives of Russia, the UN, and Turkey?
All of the parties will be represented, but those arrangements are still to be determined. Today, what we have is a technical meeting that the government of Turkey has convened.
So
but we'll see down the line. But our expectation is next week there will be a senior level meeting taking place.
And when you say all the parties, that will include Russia, Ukraine, the United Nations, and Turkey?
Exactly.
Okay. And is there going to be any readout at all on Rebecca Greenspan's current meeting in Moscow?
Well, since you've asked, sure. What I can tell you is that Rebecca Greenspan traveled to Moscow on the 5th of May as part of the ongoing consultations with senior Russian officials regarding the UN's engagement to facilitate the unimpeded export of Russian food and fertilizer, including ammonia, to global markets. These efforts are part of the twofold package Istanbul agreements that include the Black Sea Initiative. Ms. Greenspan met with Sergei Vershinin, Deputy Foreign Minister of the Russian Federation, relaying the strong commitment of the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, to the full implementation of the agreement.
Okay, and on Afghanistan, there's still no date for the meeting that the Secretary General said he plans to call?
No, nothing to announce on that at this stage.
And one final question. Is the Secretary General planning to convene a global conference of the world's nations on the growing concerns about the impact of artificial intelligence?
This is, as you know, a subject that the Secretary General thinks is crucially important to deal with. And it is something that he's following very closely, but we do not, at this stage, have any plan for a conference to announce. First, we'll go to James Bays on the screen, then back to you, and then around. So, James?
Hello, Farhan, in Kabul today. What you've announced with Afghanistan sounds like a bit of a fudge to me. It doesn't sound like you've come up with a definitive position. So is your review actually complete and over?
Well, as I pointed out just now, the matters are under constant review. So to a certain extent, we'll keep evaluating our position. At this stage, there's no particular change in policy to announce.
And can you confirm, which I've heard from the highest levels of the UN, that there is a substantial, serious disagreement going on between the humanitarian and the political side of the UN on how to proceed?
That's really not a question for me. And as I pointed out, we're working to come to decisions on appropriate working modalities. Obviously, we have a challenge because the needs of the Afghan people are immense, and we intend to fulfill those needs. But at the same time, our operations are clearly impeded for the reasons we have described. And until the de facto authorities change their policies, our position on the need to allow all staff, men and women, to work in communities in Afghanistan remains unchanged.
So one final question to try still to decipher exactly what's going on and what is going to go on the ground. I'm assuming the UN is not planning to defy the Taliban and send out women against the Taliban's orders, and yet you say humanitarian work is going to continue. So you've decided just to send out just male UN workers right now?
Well, as we pointed out, there have been some areas where there have been carve-outs with the de facto authorities, and we'll use those. But as you're aware, we also do not intend to pursue any policies that will put the safety and indeed the lives of our staff at risk. We'll go first to Yvonne and then to Sylviane.
Yeah, my question is following the reports of the dismissal of the senior WHO scientist Peter Benenbarek this week over sexual misconduct allegations. The allegations first arose, according to reports, in 2018, and yet 3 years later, in 2021, Mr. Benenbarek led a joint mission to China on the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. What does the Secretary General think, what message does the Secretary General think that sent to Mr. Benenbarek's accusers at the time?
I don't want to say anything to interfere with the World Health Organization's own review of its actions. We trust that they will review how this matter has been handled and take appropriate action and follow up if there were any deficiencies in how they've dealt with this.
Okay. One other question. How many other allegations over sexual misconduct are currently being investigated across the UN and its agencies?
That's a rather large amount.
Is it large?
Because, well,
a large amount?
Well, the fact is that each agency would have its own things. So I would have to try to rope in the numbers from different agencies.
Is there a way of finding out?
What I can do is I can get you the number from the Office of Internal Oversight Services, and that I can do fairly quickly. But for the agencies, you'll need to do some research with the individual groups.
Okay. So
but I will check on the OIOS
all right, so
number.
for the, could you maybe answer a question on the UN Secretariat?
And as my colleague just reminded me, we also have our periodic reports on sexual exploitation and abuse, so you can look at those. Those are public documents on our website.
Okay, but do you know how many investigations are currently being undertaken with regards to the UN Secretariat?
Yes, I'll check OIOS, the Office of Internal Oversight Services, for what the numbers of current investigations are, and we'll see, and I'll get back to you on that. Sylviane.
Thank you, Farhan. The Security Council will be meeting on Tuesday to review, on consultation, to review the latest report, 1559, of the Secretary General. Who will be briefing the Council?
I believe that's a briefing by our special coordinator, Joanna Vronetska.
She will be here in New York?
I don't know whether it will be.
From Beirut?
I will know closer to the date whether she'll travel here or whether it will be by virtual briefing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Alan, and then we'll go to Michelle on the screen.
Thank you, Farhan. I'm sorry I didn't get it. Did DSG get the response for his to his letter addressed to President Putin?
As far as we're aware, as of today, the answer is we have not received a formal response. Michelle.
No surprises. A couple of questions on the grain deal and what you've just announced about no authorization of any new vessels to take part. Do you have any figures on how many ships are currently authorized and awaiting inspection, and how many ships are currently awaiting authorization?
Yes, there's numbers available on the JCC website, so look over there and you'll have the latest tallies, including how many inspections are happening and how many ships are waiting.
Yeah, I'd appreciate your help on that. There's a lot of data there, and I want to get it accurate. So
like I said, it is on the JCC website, and for any further details on that, I can put you in touch with our colleague Ismini Pala, who can give you more on those numbers.
Okay, yeah, I'm talking to her. All right, I'll talk to you offline.
All right, and thanks.